We're going to turn to the last section, maybe it's the next to last section in the first chapter of our text, just to see what Feldman has to say. He's asking us to examine the way people deal with arguments. Remember, I've told you a logic course is not a course in psychology about the way people actually do things, it's about the way people ought to think. So I think we're looking at the way people deal with arguments from a perspective of when they sometimes don't respond in a reasonable fashion. What mistakes do they make? And let's just start right at the top. He says people respond to arguments in a variety of ways. No doubt the way a particular person responds varies from one time to another, depending on the topic of argument, the person's mood, or any number of other factors. Nevertheless, we can identify a few general types of respondent. Nevertheless, we can identify a few general types of respondent. I think what he's really identifying is some common way people look at things, and I think we're going to find it problematic. We'll build upon a classification drawn by Isaac Watts in 1775 in his book Logic. I guess they spelled it different in those days. One thing that you guys ought to know is going back to maybe it's the late 1600s, 1700s. I certainly know in the times of Thomas Hobbes, a philosopher some of you guys might have heard of in your history courses, very famous political philosopher. There was no standard spelling of English, and maybe this was something that was left over from that period of time. Watts identifies four types of respondents: the credulous person, the person of contradiction, the dogmatist, the skeptic, which he describes as follows. And let's just take a look at the credulous person. The credulous person, the credulous man is, and I think woman also. I think man back in those days. This is a 20th century, late 20th, early 21st century about the sex connotation, or whether the language discriminates against women, really, but back there men meant a human being. The credulous man is ready to receive everything for truth that has but a shadow of evidence, maybe that doesn't even need a shadow of evidence. Every new book that he reads and every ingenious man with whom he converses has power enough to draw him into the sentiments of the speaker or writer. He has so much complacence in him, he's easy to get along with, doesn't rock the boat, or weakness of soul, that he is ready to resign his own opinion to the first objection which he hears, and to receive any sentiments, any feelings of another that are asserted with a positive air and must assurance. As anybody who seems sure of himself, says something with a positive air, this guy believes. So in cataloging our, and notice I'm saying at the top of the slide, irrational attitudes, reaction to reasons, we have the first category of guy, the guy who has what you might call credulity, or is credulous. He believes everything he or she hears, thinks everyone or the last person that he or she heard was right. Now let's quickly go over to Wikipedia to make sure we understand that word credulity, gullibility. We take a look at credulity in Wikipedia, which is oftentimes a good source for information. Sometimes it's since it's not edited, but rather people contributed, sometimes there are things in there that are not quite right. This one I think is pretty good. Credulity is a state of willingness to believe in, or many people excuse me, let me start. Let's go over to Wikipedia now. Wikipedia is a good source for information. Sometimes the information is questionable, but oftentimes it's really pretty good. So if you take it with a grain of salt and you're careful about how you use Wikipedia, you'll probably end up with learning something from it. It says credulity is the state of willingness to believe in one or many people or things in the absence of reasonable proof or knowledge. Credulity is not simply belief in something that may be false. The subject of the belief may even be correct, but a credulous person will believe it without good evidence. Go down to the section that now says meaning. The words gullible and credulous are commonly used as synonyms. Jip, and gay, 1984, state that while both words mean unduly trusting or confiding, notice unduly, without reason, gullibility stresses being duped or made a fool of, suggesting a lack of intelligence, whereas credulity stresses uncritical forming of beliefs, suggesting a lack of skepticism. Jewell in 2006 states the difference is a matter of degree. The gullible are the easiest to deceive, while the credulous are, quote, a little too quick to believe something, but they usually aren't stupid enough to act on it. Stupid enough to act on it, not stupid enough to act on it. It's an attitude. It's an attitude of believing what you hear without giving the appropriate amount of care, attention, or you guys might be familiar with the word scrutiny, to carefully examine the thing, to see what reasons are there for believing it. In fact, I once had a boss who used to say, I agree with you, but you know, I always agree with the last person that I spoke to, meaning he just kept on accepting everything people said. Now we see when we're worried about what we ought to believe, what we ought to believe rationally, being credulous, having credulity is a problem because you're believing something without the appropriate reason, without the appropriate evidence or justification.